Hello, hello. This is going to be a short video for Rune demonstrating how to debug his game in Visual Studio. The reason why we're going to do this is because his game currently crashes, and this is a good opportunity to show how to get it fixed, how to figure out what's really going on. This is actually my Linux computer, and if I were to debug, I would use GDB. We're not going to do that today, though. We're going to do Visual Studio. So I'm actually going to swap over to my Windows computer here, where I already have his game loaded. So here, this is the source file for the game, and I'm just going to go ahead and run the game. The issue we run into is when we get here, we end up with this crash, vector subscript out of range. Now, the error says that there is a subscript out of range, but there's quite a few vectors in his program, and we're not exactly sure which one is the problem, and what the value that the problem is. An easy way to debug is to start your program in debugging mode with the local Windows debugger here. Another way is if you already have the program loaded like this, you can hit retry. This will restart it, hopefully. No, you don't want to do it? Cool. Restart like this. Okay, so the first things that's going to be different when we use the debugger is that we can actually stop the program at any given time. So we can pause. Thank you for telling me that. And when we pause, we can look at things. Specifically, when we crash. So I'm going to hit retry here, and when I do, we get a bunch of data down here. Down here, these are all the variables at this point in time, and most of this doesn't seem very useful right now. The crash tells you exactly where it crashed. So right here, a breakpoint instruction in something. This isn't very useful to us, but what we're going to do from here is use the step out function. Okay, so clearly we can't go another iteration of our program. So the next thing I'm going to do is look at this call stack. The call stack is basically the order things are executed in. At the top, you have the latest thing it's trying to do. That's where we're at right now. But if we go further down, we can kind of recognize some things in our program. Like we have this onUser update at line 1037. So right before this vector was called, which went into this vector class to try and do something, we called onUser update line 1037. And immediately you'll notice that this is where it got left off. The cool thing about debugging is you can mouse your cursor over any variable and see what the value becomes. You already know something strange, that target curvature is -1 billion something. But on top of that, track section is 0. And this is telling because vectrack 0 minus 1 would mean we're reaching into the -1 vectrack array. And if we look, vectrack only has values 0 through 5 and not -1. So, since track section is 0, and we're grabbing the -1 position in target in vectrack, we end up with this target curvature that is way beyond what we expect. And because it's way beyond what we expect, we get the crash here. The subscript is indeed out of range. Now, that is how we identify the problem, line by line, using the call stack. And that's also how we see what the values are. So this is very useful. I'm going to go ahead and stop the program now because it crashed. So now we have to figure out how to solve it. Why was track section 0 to begin with? Actually, I should have left this up. But before we do that, let's talk about a breakpoint real quick. If I put a breakpoint, it means I want to stop at this particular point in the program. So let's say, since target curvature is back based on track section, I want to say, okay, I want to look through this loop and see if we're going through it, because track section, if you notice, gets incremented here, ++. So if track section was 0, it means nothing ran here. So I'm going to breakpoint right before the while loop and tell the program I want to stop there because I'm interested in it. So we get here, there's no error, but we stopped here. The cool thing about setting a breakpoint is you can now pause and look at all the variables. So just looking at our little while loop code here, we can mouse over things again. This is very helpful. While track section is less than vectrack that size, which should have been 5 or so. So vectrack has a size of 6, and offset is less than or equal to distance. Uh-oh. We see here offset is 0, and distance is -100. So this will never run, which means track section never gets incremented, which means it starts at 0. And that's definitely a bug in our program and not the intended behavior. So now we have to find out, how did distance get set to -100 in the first place? Let's stop our program again. This time, I'm going to go search for an instance, of distance, specifically where we defined it, and go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and peek at the definition. This lets us see where it was defined. So it started at 0, great. That's all well and good, it's not -100. Now I'm going to hit find all references. Where did we use this in our code? No, you don't want to tell me? Okay. You want to tell me? That's cool, I guess. If not, I'll just go find it ourselves. I'm going to start up here from the top because programs call from top to bottom. Scroll up. Each of these little marks indicates that they are being called. And here's something interesting. Right here, we have distance equals track distance minus 100. Aha! So right away, distance is being set to -100 because guess what? Track distance at this point is 0. Let's confirm all of this. Let's use the debugger again to start from here and confirm our variables that we think is happening. So right here I added a breakpoint. This means it's going to pause right before it enters this loop. At this point, nothing has happened yet. I think one thing we should do here, I'll open this. That'll make it easier. This is our current instance of Pixel Game Engine. Right here we see the distance variable, right? We want to watch that. So I'm actually going to pin that, and I'll put it at the top. Cool, because that's really all we care about. I can hide everything else, I guess. I wish I can... see. There we go. I just want to watch on this. That's all I care about right now. And what you can do is, I'm not going to add a breakpoint anywhere else. We have different ways to enter into this function. We can step into it, we can step over it, or step out of it. Because it's a for loop, I want to actually step into it. Now you'll immediately notice vectrack is size 0. So when I hit step into, it actually skips the for loop. So we know, aha, this loop never runs. That means track distance is now 0. That means distance after this call will be equal to -100 because 0 minus 100 will be -100. We're going to step over this, which means it executes. Now, distance is -100. It just changed. And that's it. That's how we figured out that distance is -100. What does that mean? Well, since we moved all the vectrack code, the generation of it to be after the menu, we no longer do either of these. So we're actually going to delete these. And with that out of the way, if we were to run it again, perhaps looking at distance now, that's where our breakpoint was. We're watching this distance, which is now 0. I'm going to remove the breakpoint so it no longer pauses. And when I hit continue, now we're just playing. That's how we fixed it. If we wanted to, we can now verify that going into here does indeed produce the values we want. I'm going to breakpoint inside that while loop. We can take a look at what the value is after it gets set. So here, at this point, offset is 0, distance is 0, which means it does increment the offset by the next track section, and it will plus the track section variable. I'm going to step over this. It's going to do the next line of code. I'll step over that. It exits the while loop, goes back into the while loop, sees if it's still true. At this point, track section is now 1, so it's going to be looking at the first element of vectrack, which is at position 270. And because it is, we're exiting that while loop. And there you have it. I'm going to get rid of the breakpoint now. We can hit continue. Just keep running the game. I hope this little debugging tutorial helps you. When you run into troubles or can't figure out certain behaviors, breakpoint it. And then you can watch for certain variables you're looking for. As another example, let's say you want to debug your menu. And for some reason, like here with this OR, I know we fixed this earlier because you saw that it wasn't correct. But let's say you didn't know that this was the issue, but you can't exit the menu. I'll demonstrate real quick what happens here. We go to track selection, you try to hit back, and you actually go to the car selection, which means you didn't go back a menu. So immediately we're like, wait a second, let me look at track select here. And let me figure out what's wrong. So let's breakpoint here, because this is probably where it's happening, because we pressed enter. So what is highlighted at this point? That's what we want to know. So I'm going to press start game, track select, select back again. We were expecting it to go back to the main menu. So we look here, we can watch for certain variables. I'm actually going to get rid of this now. That was from the previous debugging session. We go back. God, how do we go back? Okay, locals. The watch one window was over the locals window. So if we open this again, this is the Pixel Game Engine instance we're currently in. We're interested in the highlighted value. We'll actually see the highlighted value is 9. So the highlighted value is correct. We can find it down here too. I'll pin it, and then we can watch for those again. This time I'm not going to hit watch so it doesn't bring up the menu. So we're watching for highlighted. So if I want to know what happens next in this to determine, ideally, right, we go back to the previous menu. We're expecting it to go to play game, because it's not we're not supposed to go to car select. So I'm actually going to hit step over. Step over is supposed to go down here because we were expecting it to highlight it as 9, right? So we were expecting to go back to the menu, but we got to this instead. Aha. So something is wrong with this logic. Let's take a look. If highlight is greater than or equal to 0, it is. It's 9, so it enters. It's because of this OR here. If we were to use an AND instead, right, then that would no longer be true. can do another restart here with the new code. We still have the breakpoint in, so it will stop the moment we hit back here. This time, highlighted is 9 still. If highlighted is greater than or equal to 0, it is, and it's less than 8, it's not. So when we hit step over, you can see the next call will be down here instead of up here. So now it's going to go to the play game menu, and that's what we expect. I'm going to remove the breakpoint, we're going to hit continue, and you can see we're back to track selection now because we fixed that piece of logic in our code. If I ever do have questions about your code and you want to at least spend some time figuring out what's wrong yourself, do go through the motions. Set breakpoints, have your game pause, take a look at the variables. If the variables are weird, maybe screenshot that, say, hey, this variable is not what I expected it to be, and do some step overs or step intos. See if the game logic is following the code correctly. If it's not, then your logic might be wrong, like in that if statement, or a number might be set wrong, like in that array we were talking about earlier, where it got set to -1, causing it to go out of bounds. Anyways, hopefully that helps you in your future endeavors for debugging.